comes into the focus of attention, even of historians, forgive me for this one, tautology, and in the mass consciousness in general. How rule well subject to all sorts of superficial judgments. Of course, the story of Genghis Khan, what did you think? And where else to tell the story of Genghis Khan like on the South Sea coast in South America? This is the best place in America. Story about his military skills. Very many people believe that Khan was an outstanding organizer, great state activist. Well, they somehow doubt about the art of war, that he had generals, and that he himself, well, of course, conqueror, but was he a great general? Let's ask ourselves this question. Was Genghis Khan a great general? With just think about it, Tom and Ivory ruin military heirs would be one of the greatest military men. The genius of history, Subuddin Bhagata, well, probably was. But on the other hand, and so here someone will remember the great victories that are brilliant exactly from the point of view of martial arts which Khan implemented. When we talk about Napoleon, immediately there Ali is reminded of the Battle of Mecca, the Battle of Issa, the Battle of the Granite here, and about Genghis Khan no one, so he won't really remember well. Partly because who knows these battles? Yes, in the ancient Asian states there. And the name Chudago, as a general, you know, that's enough. I wonder what can be said about Genghis Khan, but they don't say it because, as a rule, historians who wrote about Genghis Khan did not know much about military heirs, or it was secondary to them, a secondary background for stories about history. And on the other hand, there is very little good at all it is written. This is one of the most slandered gures in world history, only in last decades of great honor of the Russian historical school, including in the innerest of all as a result of the works of Russian historians. Of the great step begins Lev Gumilev, Nuno, and Farin, also French especially, of course, began to change the attitude to Genghis Khan is changing, and today, of course, he no longer looks so worthy of the odious ones, Hitler of the 10th century. How could he have been imagined in his absolutely fascist state? The novel memory of the Russian writer Chivalykin back in the 80s of the last century, however, but exactly about the military art of Genghis Khan, is not so much has been written, far less than about Napoleon, who is second only to Genghis Khan. All indicators, starting from the results of the board, ending with the results here, and accordingly no one gives a clear picture, a clear answer to the question, was there Genghis Khan? I think I was a great commander, and I will try. You need to show it on a specific example, more precisely onto at once examples that are united by a common design and brilliance of execution. I will tell you about two strategic operations of Genghis Khan that he carried out completely consciously during in the second case, based on the experience of the RST operation and in which it manifested itself. A brilliant military talent, he is of course a strategist of a huge scale, a strategist, and we'll see about that today. Han, of course, there was an outstanding commander, but he was defeated in tactical battles. We know the defeat of Genghis Khan from Jacques in the battle, where 70 Bogaturovs were later boiled in cauldrons from the kind of emergency, is known. Very big, very dangerous defeat of Khan in the battle with Van, and the same high already when he was in great strength, when the Khan was getting for power in the great step. In at the beginning centuries here are the generals, they are like, this war is difficult today, you win tomorrow, you on strategist. This is different. A strategist is a person who doesn't just GHT a battle. He wins the war, he wins, and in this case I will show you two maneuvers. Genghis Khan, who won the war against two very strong opponents who in many ways they were superior to the state as a whole. I will tell you about two battles, about to the story of two campaigns of Genghis Khan which he carried out against Georgeni and against the Kharism of Muhammad. Are two operations connected by a common plan and a brilliant performance. The war was a colossal military power built on the basis of the Chinese civilization, and to a much greater extent than it later succeeded. The Mongols will also rely on the Mongols. When will the Yuan Empire be created specifically for the Chinese civilization? But versus still this, there will be more steppe. The Zhou Empire merged with China more strongly, but as a consequence of their descendants Manchu, and created in the century in the north of China state which received the name Ding Golden. This Ding Empire surpassed me, I don't even know what time, for 2 orders of magnitude, at least 2 orders of magnitude. 2 orders of magnitude surpassed Mongolia, the Great Steppe, in terms of population, but I'm talking about the power of civilization technology. And Nance, I won't say anything there, it's not comparable at all. They led all the Mongols, by the way. They used to be damn mil, some say 300, but now for sure no one will install it, of course, but nevertheless 1 million Mongols and 140 million people lived in China and in northern China, which it was run by the state of Melons, probably 40 million plus, very large preponderance. It seemed that a war against such a power was absolutely unthinkable, but Genghis Khan decided on this war, which was pushed by the memory of his blood relatives. His ancestor Hai Khan was nailed to a wooden cross for insults committed to his ancestors. The donkey Jamie hears his father killed by the Tartars Pawnee Juge. So of course N had personal motives for Omni Juge Imp VM hiking in Greats every 3 years, sending an expedition to exterminate wolves and destruction. The nomads, as they wrote, simply carried out genocide in other countries as well. Every Mongol family had lost their lives at Genghis Khan's vengeance seeped into their brains and blood. As the Chinese author wrote, is very curatively, what can you do if you have dozens of times less of everything? Plus keep in mind that between Genghis Khan's domain and the Zhou state, the Gobi Desert was absolutely impassable for most of the year. The stony desert of Central America, Asia, and where it was possible to pass. But this is in the east, in the area where the HL is one of these. It was possible in principle, and even now it is possible through the internal New Mongolia. It's not easy to move to Khingan. There showed the expedition of the Red Army in the 40 FTH year. The transfer of troops across the Mongolian steppes and Khingan are among the most daring marching maneuvers in history. Military, but he in the X century demanded that the victorious Red Army that had just won the war with Germany, enormous tension. See of the BH commanders of the Soviet Union, Marshal Vasilevsky. This was to be done by nomads, people who are considered wild and educated. It seems like he was illiterate, although at the same time he ordered to create the Mongolian written language is understood as its meaning here. They made this maneuver. How could they not have? Manchuria, they built a powerful system of fortifications, not the Chinese Anja rather. But the fact is that the Great Wall of China in those days was not in very good condition. But she was far inside countries, only in places the fortresses were and the wall itself remained. But against the nomadic Ding Empire has created a powerful system. Well, how should I say, most of all similar to the system Serif Devil of the Russian states in the 15th century. Fortresses, the moats are purely Kolazaseki in general, a very powerful system of fortifications, bamboo. The curtain is so called, and it was absolutely impossible for the Mongols to pass through it. Impossible, just so you don't get noticed or stopped by the superior ones. Emperor Juge had a much superior force. In the list of troops, 600 per men, including 15,000 heavy plate cavalry, which is quite comparable to European knights of that time if you take the scale of a large kingdom, some kind of France. But of course not about 600.00, we say 600. This apparently was on the allowance of the Chinese, the bureaucrats who counted and wrote down all these numbers. You know what approach to armies of Chinese bureaucrats and the approach of military leaders. It is different. Bureaucrats believe eaters, generals, bayonets. That IGHT, well, it turns out an interesting one like this thing, bayonets in ancient times. Well, it's like not eaters at all, not just yaks for everyone. The bayonet was also used by this group of eaters, that is, out of these 600,000 count 500. 0. Probably there were all sorts of secondary services while also the most important thing is for one soldier to get in a trench it should be served by 5 people. Cooks, drivers, SDA logisticians. How many things there are, and here in antiquity it was the same. Especially in the bureaucratic, the empire is Chinese. So don't really be alarmed by such monstrous numbers. That Emperor D had almost no troops. More than anything, population. We know this from Specino. You look at the start time wars with the empire are not 1 to 9. But 95 there is another list of thousands, 95 family 95 100. 0 of it in general would be with the Mindari Guards, even some detachments. If the enemy would join forces with us, a blow of such power that the Mongols will have nothing to oppose because they have him, of course. There were heavily armed horsemen, but in very small numbers, and so they were mostly Mongol troops. It consisted of light cavalry and archers, so masha jelly, well, it's the same for those times. The most advanced state in the world is China, respectively Southern China, Southern Song. The North China Empire is a very formidable militarily devised state option which was suggested to him by his knowledge of the Great Steppe. Here he performed as nomad. The fact is that the Gobi Desert is almost all under but 2 weeks a year when the monsoons pass and the winter cover of ice is removed. Gobi winds bloom, snow melts, numerous lakes with water much as in a Chepish, thousands of oas bloom around the lush vegetation covers. Stony deserted expanses are a continuous carpet, and during these weeks the Gobi turns into a Garden of Eden. And during these 2 weeks, Genghis Khan moved his army, his 100 horsemen, across the Gobi and hit where no one expected him, hit him, bypassing the entire Jurchen system of defensive lines built by the Manjura Mongols. The horses are too tough to handle. They've updated these bamboo ones walls, and it turned out that they have a very powerful defensive wall, and the Mongols have it. We went around through the Gobi. It stretched from the Gobi to Khingan. Well, of course. Why Gobi? There's no one there. Accordingly, they fortied from the Gobi to Khingan. Genghis Khan's maneuver was completely unexpected. And this is the RST-1 strategic maneuver with a detour through the desert to avoid the enemy. Second, 100,000 riders are a big force, especially since there are several horses behind each rider, but you can't ride one horse to war. One is a acting horse, the other is a harness. Via was carrying all sorts of logs for Kochiv Poho. You need a spare cat in general horse at least then and then respectively. Feed this huge horde well. Where are you her? It will feed you the most important thing. Sort it out and send it to Yuuzhan. To the conclusion, oh look what the turtle, it's dead. It's thrown out. Storm music. The strategist came up with a strategic plan for how to move with great force through deserted areas so that his troops don't interfere with each other. The main thing is that the horses have a place to eat. To provide the passage, solve the logistics problem. Understand, my friends? The most important thing in war is logistics. Here are all my videos dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war. They are in mainly around supply logistics. What is spinning? Others talk about tactics, technical data about how here's what they need, here's how they all sorts of heroes, various all sorts of cases of tactics. Well, I will answer you to this, that the pros talk about tactics and the logistics specialist has nothing to shoot with. You will not have any tactics accordingly. What is the use of it then? And for Genghis Khan, the war was a matter of logistics, especially imagine it gathers all the forces of his people. The people of the army of 800. 0 inhabitants of 100.0 octa's awesome fucking degree of mobilization. Sorry for my French, but I can't help but exclaim in utter amazement before the organizational abilities of this illiterate nomad leader who really was a genius at that, including a military unit. It is necessary to create such an army from the population that well before that for many decades. Only enmity, of course. He was a genius, and now question, he created this army and what about it to do, how to feed it is not even so much people as horses, and he came up with it. He came up with the principle of waging war, which has been very rarely used in the West. Ever since there are only a few more of them thus. The base is brought forward. This is the essence of the Mongolian school of logistics, the war of it. For the account of the enemy's funds, that is. We go with the expectation that we are there somewhere, something here. For our soldiers, for our horses we wound. And accordingly, it was born exactly out of the nomadic movement. When you can't go a huge horde with one road, all the water will be drunk, all the grass will be eaten, and you will go. The horde is divided into nomads by their own routes, and they go in separate columns. This is what will then be Moltke's principle. Go to Russia, be together. Genghis Khan didn't know Moltke, but he implemented this principle in the 13th century, long before Moltke. So he did it simply on the basis of experienced nomads. He divided his army because otherwise he couldn't move, couldn't supply her with grass and water, and that means the Mongol army everything goes in different ways. So it separates from this, makes the military principle, puts the howl of the cause at the head of the commanders capable of independent military operations. World DBRST of all Chinese hike 1-to-1 of the 14th year. This is of course DB here. His tactical potential was revealed, an operational genius in all its glory. He was brilliant. He was an associate of Subodai and Genghis Khan, and it was he who complemented Subodai as a tactician to a greater extent, and as a master of maneuver than his trips to the Tianshan hiking through Pamir. They listened well. This is well, there are three brilliant samples of mountain warfare, 3 of them to Mongolian, by the way, for the entire World War. The war in history is Suvorov's campaign across the Alps, is the trek of Erntai, son of Subodai Bagar, across the South China Sea. The mountain is still much more difficult than Suvorov's hike, and here is the DB raid through Shami. This is generally something amazing, but it will be later, and now commands from the wings. The Mongol army well, and other commanders there. Baku and Kolikolita was a brilliant general, divides the army into separate columns and moves, goes wide front through the steppe, provides he's got logistics, water and grass, and he takes them by surprise. They don't feel like it, they have time, they have a huge similarity in forces, but they do not have time to collect their own troops. When the troops of Genghis Khan passed through the Gobi, bypassing all the battle formations, Juni strategically bypassing them from the Ankh breaks into the rear, begins a feverish attack. The enemy's movement is delayed because the RST reaction is always no, this is not maybe. It's just not possible. Accordingly, small detachments are sent. So probably there is something wrong. Let's have a small squad asking for Dawam. Moreover, Rez understands that this is actually a strategic threat already. It happens. It's too late. The whole Mongol army is already there. It's already beating the enemy in pieces. Like this Juni acted, and so did Khan, just rolled up the sun, their battle formations, as they say. And nuns in the result is a crushing defeat of the Golden Army empires after forcing their fortified lines and rush back to defend the mountain pass leading to the capital. In short, it's get a strategic environmentness, and so she moved to defend the capital, and in the Battle of Yahoo Lin was completely defeated, destroyed, just slaughtered a huge Chinese army. Manchu Chinese Jude China's Han won a major victory in world military history. Up to and by Vom Koto is also not a cheat and did not know, but acted according to his principles, that in the war win by maneuver the victory was achieved at the expense of the strategic more. It is already a matter of tactics, a matter of generals. Collies, ships beat the enemy in pieces, and so on. This was already the task of another level scale. Well, listen well. This is the scale of the century. Next time a similar one. The operation will be carried out only by the Red Army in Soro the FDH year. Neither earlier nor later, no one else has ever managed anything like this before. Because let me remind you of the attempts of the Chinese to transfer monstrous height through the Gobi ends with them dying out and dying attempts. I smear then go to. Do not leave anything, and later Japan seemed so dest a shame this sun ended only when the Red Army. But it did not. She went through the Gobi. She went through Khingan there to Gobino North part. It was easier there now. With this brilliant experience under your belt, it's absolutely amazing. Undervalued until now. Poor scale operations. Well, this is a frontline operation even at the current scale of 100. 0 people in bit Iho. In an amazing case music, Genghis Khan begins his second war. The big one against Rimshah Muhammad is very much underestimated in our country. I think that Rimshah, some idiot who rush over troops on fortresses. Mediocre, leaked everything. 400.00 against 100.00 Mongols. I acted completely senseless, but this is not so. This is absolutely not so, friends. I tried in my videos dedicated to the conquest of Central Asia by the Mongols. This is to show that actually I don't know the art of war. You can think that way. And that's how the primitive explained it. Letopus of the X century, like who was a merchant in general, and did not understand anything about war. I collected gossip in Massil to sit without howling well and others, but in fact everything was much more complicated, much more interesting. Shah Muhammad had a large army that outnumbered Genghis Khan's 400 men against the same position as Jejeni, that is behind the deserts of 40-line fortresses by Jehun Po Siadaria beyond, which were the Kizilkum and Siadaria deserts, the center of the state. But it was possible to pass through the roads that now exist between Almaty and Tashkent. On this road, it was possible to pass through these foothills of Dansha and conquer Central Asia. Usually like this, the conquerors did everything and went so all the fortifications were built on the basis of what is going on software defense. Sihu fortresses located on the right bank did not allow nomadic peoples to enter the city. The rivers can't be crossed until the fortresses are taken. The fortress can't be taken hard while they are the defender well, because there is no other way. A nomad has the advantage of mobility, RST strike surprise advantage. And how can you defend against this? Just by building a wall, a bamboo wall. There anything with a purpose. Here they broke through, but we know where they broke through. The army, and on the way back they are intercepted in the depths of the country. We destroy with blows from all sides, and Toneni Street conceived it. Yes, he conquered China, but Yotto the great Shah Muhammad, who has conquered much more civilized nations, and China, I'll win it too. But this barbarian here, dirty, we're going to beat him now. So he's stationed his troops in the fortresses of Po Siadaria, blocking all approaches to their country, so that it was impossible to break through undetected, and then gathered the main forces in the rear. In the Rana of Bokhara, Sarkhan and Tam are exactly in the idea that right now the enemy is breaking through the line fortresses. We have it. We meet the main forces of his weakened detachments and destroy them. Tactics that Dmitry will use later. Donskoy and his descendants carry on in Russia, which all the time in general is normal tactics for dealing with nomads. It is international. And this is what Genghis Khan did, knowing about what awaits him, realizing that it is necessary to go head on through the Tashkent. Past this one along the Chanshan, he did not. If he is met there by superior forces and defeated, he will be the same. The very maneuver that gave him victory over Jujnemi. He is making a main force march through the desert. That is while he is being held by the enemy. The troops make a diversionary maneuver and storm Cogent, where heroically Timur Melik is storming Otra, where Khan and Nauchik assassinated the ambassadors and plundered the caravan. That spawned the war. Erst leaks to the last, and choking in blood, then dies. He is poured in the mouth of gold, for which, according to legend and perhaps even in reality, Genghis Khan was taken away from the Mongol Tsars a peculiar sense of humor, and he could have done it. And so far, there are bloody battles on the lines of fortresses along the Siadaria are still, and other Kriposti is blocked. Genghis Khan blocked all detachments of Tulu Joki junior members. The sons are storming the fortresses in the lower reaches of the Siadaria. All the fortresses are occupied this time as well. Moment with the main forces. Genghis Khan crosses the Sea Darya between the fortresses and deep into the desert moor. From the point of view of boorish military leaders, meaningless, and they don't even have it. Yes, but it's impossible. Well, who goes through the desert? It's the desert of death. Ella on read the sands of Poshul exactly. In that short period of time in February, in March, when Kulku like the Gobi are covered with lush vegetation, tulips bloom Shnaya. After the descent of the snowstorm will crack from the heat. The land is all that gives a fantastic riot of colors in this great desert, Asian turning into a wonderful paradise for a couple of weeks, and here it is again. Top the same maneuver was carried out by him in February on the spring grass. Through the trestle. Why on the spring grass? Because in February in Colma Spring. I was in Fergana in February. This is well, here I am in a jacket. There I went there. It was warm, insanely warm, and even more so in Tashkent and so on. He caught a warm one time. Caught a riot of colors. The O-ring of the steppe transferred the main forces, and suddenly I found myself right near Samarkand in the rear of all the troops of Kharazm Shah Muhammad, while he also cut Kharazm Shah himself, who was still standing even further away, and now he has lost contact with the troops that were king on Sadaria. What did Muhammad do? His army tried to break through. It was defeated. Bukhara and Markan fell. And then the flight began. He realized that, well, logistics reserves, they are not very large, all of them. Do you understand? Do you think that we meet separate detachments with the main forces of our own selected? And here these picked forces began to scatter in terror before the Mongols, because they did not know. We didn't understand how he crossed over Genghis Khan across the desert. What is this? What the fuck is this devil? So that's all. And in fact, one march of the Moor through the desert was associated with the collapse of the state of Korin Muhammad. I had to Iran to collect new ones there. The troops in the end did not collect anything. He was chased because the pursuit, the enemy, is the Mongols' trump card. In all companies, by the way, and in the Chinese one too. As soon as they bypassed the Chinese one, they started the Chinese Manchurian army pursue the main forces until they have defeated them all coolly, without giving a chance opportunity to look back. Catch your breath, make an informed decision. You know, it is extremely important that the command, the enemy, reacted in a hurry in the PPH. If it wasn't right, then it was the same with Muhammad. He should have, of course, go to the Sardar to collect there. The army is all around you. But in first, how does it feel to go to the Sea Darya when you are already surrounded and you own the country? And now it is being captured, a cruel enemy, and Genghis Khan did not accidentally use it there. Under Samarkand has its own signature tactic. Target is chosen. It is completely destroyed in order to be destroyed, to cause terror. Information is spread extremely. This is where the panic starts. The enemy's panic and fear and legends are born of invincibility and brutality. Mongol Genghis Khan did this with Samarkand because Samarkand will not be there later, even in Timur's time, fully restored after destruction. Genghis Khan. Why is this the same thing then? There were no newspapers. There were no mass media. The internet was not. It was necessary. It was impossible just to kill a small number of people there in order to kill them all. Scare is a terrible story. The city that's there, the city of Afrasiab, God knows how many thousands of years old, has been destroyed. Destroyed residents, killed, everything burned down. This is the whole. Thunder strikes the Middle Eastern Muslim world, and of course the world. Central Asia is just shocked and harmed. He loses his head and makes a bold decision to connect with the Sardar, does not accept troops on the line. He runs away, especially after treason begins around him. He has a loose state. Ho Samarkand on the side. Mongols. The Mongols use them to take the city and then ostentatiously kill the Kokos, to sow even more chaos and panic in the enemy camp, because now no one understands that it is necessary to make some strange invincibles. Mongols who do amazing things. Things are terribly cruel in general. The panic begins terribly. He won the war march maneuvers, amazing victories in fact. The main victories of Genghis Khan: defeat North Chinese Empire, defeat of the Hoa Empire, Ito, and there is its main military achievement. But pay attention to which one. This operation was carried out at the highest strategic level, especially of course Operation Central Asian, which already more developed, more mature, because troops are allocated here to besiege and block all of Kharazm's fortresses. Don't give him the chance to get the information that the main forces have crossed over, gone into the desert. No one should do this now, and no one knows Mongols. They appear out of the desert, out of the blue, and it has a stunning effect. Well, and the maneuver itself is amazing. It's a combination of natural instincts of a nomad, a desert connoisseur with a genius, a military strategist who understands what he is doing, and how far superior to anyone else. The tactical skill of the regiment of that time is not like winning a battle. Ting right ank, left ank, surrounded, smashed ank, advancing enemy ank, smashed, fell, and everyone all run. No, it was accessible to many. Genghis Khan was on a different level. He was on a different level strategic thinking. Who compare it with the XX century only because everything that was before, and it can't be compared to his gigantic operations. Scale versus empire, Dani versus Khwarezmshahs. So I believe that Genghis Khan was an outstanding commander, especially at such a strategic level, which in his time had no equal at all. It was New Subyadai Bhagata perhaps, as a strategist was somewhere close. As a tactician probably superior. Genghis Khan, yes, was superior, but as a strategist perhaps he was not far from Che Yi. At least he understood its principles of strategic art. Later on use it on trips to Russia and Hungary. Go it. Therefore to the commanders of the sovereign, who is there like this organizer of inspirers? And there as he is the general, still not particularly. Yes, no. This is a Philistine point of view that is born out of ignorance, out of a lack of understanding what was happening on the vast expanses of Asia in the X century. Occurred on such a scale that contemporaries generally, they'd never seen anything like it, but they couldn't even figure out what it was. Happens in it also could not, and only today, and only those who really try understand Genghis Khan based on the logic of military heirs and the art of war, and not from the letter eaters of ancient dusty charters compiled by people who lived through many centuries years after Genghis Khan, and somewhere very far away from him, maliciously disposed towards him as rule here. Those can to say that Genghis Khan was an outstanding strategist of the 13th century. Well, that's what we have with you. Southern Ocean talk today, mar in Spanish. Yes, it's the Atlantic Ocean. Well, now I'll give it to you again. I'll show you a walk with the scent of what it's called. These are the beautiful ones we have here, places here we talked about today, and in general one of the greatest state historical cures of the entire country. World history. Genghis Khan. Yes, my friends, the Mongol hordes. This is not an endless series of waves. They roll up. No, this is RSD of all a brilliant military art. I can to put it this way. What if Genghis Khan had not been a brilliant military commander, strategist, the largest Mongol empire on this scale? Tolo. Well, there were many times in the steppe cognates, Adherent Turkic Kyrgyz, Xiongbai. And for God's sake, what kind? There just wasn't, and then there will be, and the Jungas will be, but this scale from the Yellow Sea to the Adriatic Sea has never existed since then, and this is due to the personality of Genghis Khan. That's why I pay so much attention to the personality of this outstanding person right now, the Mongol sovereign. And we will niche the commander. Look, even here at the Atlantic on this wonderful ocean today, it is quiet and calm. We have had storms here a few days. The waves are huge rollout here. If you look at the sand, something else. It can be seen that a wide strip of sand here. It is wet. Well, actually here Seto Cover Neck, rather urban catchment area. How much here is the Alv waves here? Look. See, as far as you can see, the dark band is all the waves were here. They beat right here were huge waves, and now it's quite calm ocean. I hope that the shrow will be warm in this exile for an unwittingly exiled person. The sea is like a steppe, isn't it, after all? The great steppe and the ocean, they have something in common. God bless you, friends moaned.